Om Jnana-timirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guruho Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitamtam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sakitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padhan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsaha Sangasteshu Pajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kama. It ends about sense gratification, controlling the senses, using your intelligence, controlling your mind, etc. You would have seen that these are very key topics. And we concluded on that. In the third chapter, Krishna will start focusing on each one of them. The main topic is actually about should I do this or should I not do this? That becomes the first shloka of the third chapter, because Arjuna has been hearing it, everything that Krishna has to say and has said. He has been hearing it, no doubt. But he becomes a little confused. So the third chapter starts with Arjuna expressing his doubt very freely. Because after all, he is really interested in learning. And he is really in great pain and misery and confusion. And he has these deep questions and he strongly seeks these answers. When we are in trouble, we really want to crack. What is this? How to understand this? How to do the right thing? So when you sit down in a Bhagavad Gita class, not always are you in trouble. You know what I mean? Unless you really have a grappling with certain things in life, you won't jump into the Gita and read it and try to ask questions. And so that's a great impetus for us to learn the lessons of life. So that's what we understood, that it behooves of us to seek a guru. Krishna is saying that in the Prabhupada is saying that in the purport in the second chapter also. We must accept a person, because when you're pushed by your situation that you're in and you have problems and you're stuck and it's miserable, it's horrible, and you want to get out of it, then you'll be forced to seek counsel. And that's when you will fully hear it. You'll be all eyeballs and all ears. I want to hear it all. So this is how Arjuna is. And then he is hearing all that. In the second chapter, Krishna sort of defeated most of the arguments that Arjuna came up with in little bit here and there, but now he takes it up. In the third chapter, he'll start speaking about why you should act. Because the question was all about whether to do or not to do. That is the question. I'm using Shakespeare, Hamlet, if you know, To do or not to do is the question. So if you look at the beginning of chapter 3, you will see, I hope you have the book in front of you. Chapter 3, if you open up, Jyayasi chet karmanaste mata buddhir janardana tat kim karmani ghore mam niyojayasi keshava. Very beautiful. Arjuna is asking questions. You see, a person is really interested, he will ask question because he's involved. Arjuna said, "Oh Janardana, oh Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruit to work?" Somewhere, Prabhupada is saying that very nicely here. He's saying that somewhere Arjuna has understood that, do you mean to say that I need to actually do something? I thought I'll retire in the name of Krishna consciousness and I don't have to act because according to you, I should renounce. I should control my senses. I shall control my mind. And I can do that best by going to the Himalayas and finding a cave and sitting there and meditating. Isn't that the best thing to do? According to your advice, why should I fight this war? Because I should control my senses and my mind. I'll go there and meditate. So Prabhupada is, exposing the whole thing in the first purport, if you read, that Arjuna also thought of Krishna consciousness or Buddhi Yoga or intelligence and spiritual advancement of knowledge as something like retirement from active life and the practice of penance and austerity at a secluded place. In other words, he wanted to skillfully avoid the fighting by using Krishna consciousness as an excuse. Many people learn Bhagavad Gita to rationalize their non-performance. I'm not going to do this duty of being a husband because Krishna has said this in the Bhagavad Gita. I'm not going to do the job of a mother anymore because all this should be renounced. And this way, this dirty responsibility which is irking me, which is actually a burden on me. Wow, Krishna, thank you for giving me this wonderful shloka. Renounce, run away from the responsibility and hide behind the Gita's instructions. Become an irresponsible person from society, run away. How many of you thought so? Somewhere deep in the mind. Wow, this is great philosophy. I could use this. Somewhere deep inside, Prabhupada is very openly saying that I think Arjuna is thinking like this. He thought he could escape the awkward situation that he is in using the great advice of Krishna and he could go and simply meditate. No. The question is not that. The question is that you may have, Arjuna has in his mind, but that is not the way to go about it. That's why Krishna, he goes ahead, and if you go back to the second shloka, Vyamishrane bhavakena buddhim mohayasiva me tadekam vadanischitya yena shreyo ahamapnuyam. My intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Therefore, please tell me decisively which will be most beneficial for me. That should I do or should I get lost? And then Krishna opens up to clarify. You see, you have a first installment of knowledge given to you, and naturally you will have clarifications because it doesn't have so much depth. Depth comes in when the student also questions, and then the teacher answers, and then there's further and further discussion, and finally it goes in deep. So here you can see Arjuna, after the superficial initial introduction on chapter 2, he's taking it deeper, further inside. And he's asking, I don't understand. It is, you're on one side telling me I should be intelligently avoiding active action and don't be fruitively oriented. And the other said, you're also telling me be intelligent and engage in warfare. I cannot understand this. Vyamishraneva vakyena, your equivocal instructions. Decisively tell me, nischitam. You tell me nischitya, yena shreyo ham apnuyan. What is beneficial for me, tell me, right? So if you read in the purport there also very brilliantly, Prabhupada says that what he has explained is not very systematic because he's done an overview. This Prabhupada is saying the different paths explained where Sankhya Yoga, Buddhi Yoga, control of the senses by intelligence, work without fruit of desire, and the position of the neophyte. This was all presented unsystematically. Prabhupada is saying Krishna has presented it unsystematically. Obviously, it is just a splatter of different things. A more organized outline of the path would be necessary for action and understanding. Arjuna, therefore, wanted to clear up these apparently confusing matters so that any common man could accept them without misinterpretation. Okay? So, here comes the real point now. What is work? Everybody talks about work a lot. Everybody is engaged in work. And in fact, everybody is afraid of not being engaged in work because their mind will drive them crazy. Everybody wants to be engaged in doing something. Boy, imagine sitting alone inside a room and looking at the sky or looking at the walls. You'll go cuckoo. You'll go mad. So definitely many people work for the sake of keeping engaged. Right? And in the process, if I can get some money too, there's nothing like it. I'm engaged, I get money, and tra la la la, everything is fine. I'm engaged. But it sort of doesn't really satisfy you very well after some time. You start asking questions. It's boring, it's monotonous. It's, making a Dumbo zombie out of me. I don't feel growth. I don't feel it very edifying. And if you're a thinking person, if you're a thoughtful person, then you'll start asking these questions. And then just by force of situation and circumstances, you continue to work and you dumb yourself gradually. That is one type of thing. The other thing is people switch the work and get to do another job and another job and another job. And then they jump off and do some business. And they go, this is better. I can do what I want, when I want, and I can earn money. Wow, something. I at least don't have to be a Dumbo. I don't have to be under control of somebody. But work I will. I'll do fruitful work because it gives me money. I feel successful. I feel I'm doing something. I feel I'm contributing something. I feel I'm getting a fruit out of it. That's another thing about work. Then there are those who are really lazy. They're really lazy. Prabhupada said there are two types of people. He said the busy, foolish person. And he said the lazy, intelligent person. And he spoke about other combinations. So basically, he spoke about this a lot. He said the dangerous person is the busy, foolish guy. He's a very dangerous fellow. And then he said, the lazy, intelligent fellow is the best of the lot. Lazy, intelligent fellow is the best of the lot, Prabhupada said. He had other classifications of people who are lazy and foolish. Intelligent and lazy, I already told you, and other combinations. But out of all of these, lazy and intelligent is the best. And the busy, foolish person is the most dangerous guy. Sometimes you find that some of the leaders are really busy and foolish. They lead the society in a very crazy way. So we may all want to work in different levels in different ways. But important thing to know that Krishna is saying is that there are two types of people in this world. Loke asmin vividha nishta pura prokta maya nagha Jnana yogena sankhyanam karma yogena yoginam. Two types. One is Jnana yogena sankhyanam, number one. Number two, karma yogena yoginam. These are technical words and they're put in Sanskrit and they have deep meanings. But in the purport, in the translation, you can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, okay, let me ask somebody to read it. Saranya, can you read that translation?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Yeah. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O sinless Arjuna, I have already explained that there are two classes of men who try to realize the self. Some are inclined to understand it by empirical, philosophical speculation, and others by devotional service.
Okay, let me explain to you. How many of you know what is empirical?
Formula based. Something.
Okay. Anybody else? What is empirical? Okay, it's a philosophical term. And a lot of it is to do with Western philosophy. They have classification. So Prabhupada has used those terminologies. And here he will explain that in the second chapter. The Lord explains Sankhya Yoga, or the analytical study of the nature of spirit and matter, is a subject matter for persons who are inclined to speculate and understand things by experimental knowledge and philosophy. Can you see that in the purport? Empirical means basically through the senses. If you have heard about the Western philosopher John Locke, Locke, I don't know whether you know, it's an English philosopher who played a very key role in the 17th century, wherein he postulated this empiricism. He was a deep thinker, a philosopher, everything. And he was also from Oxford University. He studied medicine there, and he became the chief physician of the kings and the opposition and all that. And a lot of political philosophy and the theory of knowledge he spoke a lot about. He is considered to be the father of empiricism. Empirical thought means he postulated that we are all trying to understand what is the reality, what is the truth. And we're exploring, we're experimenting, we are, philosophizing, we are putting forward theories, and could be like this, could be like that, science and philosophy and everything together. But there is an inherent problem, he said. He said, we get to know the reality only by using our senses. And the senses give us data, and the mind gets to know and processes it. And the senses are very important for us to get data. The eye sees, the ear hears, the tongue tastes, the skin touches, and we get to know the external world and the realities of the external world. So senses are very important. Without the senses, we don't relate or contact the external world. So knowledge comes only through the senses and processed inside in the mind. So that is subjective, the processing of the mind, and the senses on the objective side, object of knowledge getting objective. Objective data, subjective data. He called it primary qualities and secondary quality, something like that, if I remember vaguely. So he said that it's very important for us to use our brain, use our mind, use our senses, examine things and understand empiricism. So that is empirical philosophy. Many people are never satisfied if you tell, have faith in God. Because we're all trained in a particular education system which is based on empirical thought, scientific thought, rational thought, all these different philosophies. And that's how our education system is. And that's a total Western philosophical idea that was thrown inside by the Britishers, and our education system is based on that. And our method of acquiring knowledge has become through that. But earlier, epistemology means the method of acquiring knowledge. The epistemology used from Western philosophy is what is most prevalent everywhere. And most of that is coming from the Greek philosophers. Whole of Western philosophy has got to do with the Greek philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates and pre-Socratic time and after that and everything. And that was adopted by the Christians also, because the Christian religion doesn't really have much of a philosophy at all. They married that into this. And then with that only, they spread all over the world, colonizing and making everybody Christians. And that's how. So all of us are stuck with that philosophy. But in the Vedic philosophy, like you're reading Bhagavad Gita, it is very necessary for me to say that to you. You will see that the epistemology or the method of understanding knowledge is different. We take from authority. The authority of God, the authority of the scripture is very important for us. Scripture, that is why Bhagavad Gita is speaking the truth, the reality, and we're listening to it. And the person who's the creator, Krishna himself, is speaking. And so it's absolute truth. Actually, you don't have to even think about it and analyze it and experiment and find out it is true or something like that. And mostly people don't. That's the meaning of saying the epistemology is everything is in the scripture. I just need to understand it. That's how we go about it. We already assumed that. Sometimes people question us. There's Western philosophers and Western ideas always question, how come you have faith in some book? You have not empirically verified it with your own senses, with your own mind. How do you believe? How do you guys believe some four-headed Brahma, an elephant god Ganesha, and some elephants holding in four directions the world? You guys are crazy. You will believe anything. And when we, who have been educated in Western philosophy type of methodologies, are accosted with our faith in religion, with that type of a question, a lot of them back out. And this is something is wrong with our religion because it doesn't answer these questions. And that's what you feel. No, it is not true. It is just that a Western methodology is being used against the Vedic epistemology method, and you're being asked to answer something that you have faith in through a different methodology, and you're not able to. But if you go into the Vedic methodology, which Krishna will teach you in the 4th chapter and throughout, it's very easy, believable. If you ask yourself a question, why do I believe this? I must ask yourself this question. Why do I believe the words of Bhagavad Gita? Isn't it? Right? Then you will come to answer. That's why Krishna is speaking this very brilliantly explained by Prabhupada here. So Prabhupada is saying here, there is religion without philosophy. In the 3rd, you go to text 3. You will see here in the purport, very wonderful purports written. You must read these things. The same principle is more clearly explained in the 61st verse, that this Buddha Yoga is to depend entirely on the Supreme, or more specifically on Krishna. And in this way, all the senses can be brought under control very easily. Therefore, both the yogas are interdependent as religion and philosophy. Religion without philosophy is sentiment or sometimes fanaticism, while philosophy without religion is mental speculation. Very important verse, statement. The ultimate goal is Krishna, because the philosophers who are also sincerely searching after the absolute truth come in the end to Krishna consciousness. This is also stated in Bhagavad Gita. Okay, let me stop there. You read that. Did you follow that? Religion without philosophy and philosophy without religion. So let me come back again. I explained what is empiricism and Western idea and Western philosophy. And Krishna is recognizing that it is not that Western guys got something new, that's already included in Vedic system of understanding as one of the methodologies. Sankhya Yoga, analytical understanding of everything, bit by bit, experimenting and understanding. Then Prabhupada says another thing is plain Krishna consciousness directly. Like you see in the last portion of the 3rd sloka purport, the whole process is to understand the real position of the self in relation to the super self. The indirect process is philosophical speculation by which gradually one may come to the point of Krishna consciousness. And the other process is directly connecting with everything in Krishna consciousness. Of these two, the path of Krishna consciousness is better because it does not depend on purifying the senses by a philosophical process. Krishna consciousness is itself the purifying process. And by the direct method of devotional service, it is simultaneously easy and sublime. So it may be sounding a little Greek and Latin too, so I'm going to break it down and explain to you. Again, Krishna is trying to explain what is action. Work is very important. Every soul is actually by nature active, and he has to engage himself. But you should engage yourself properly with intelligence and proper knowledge. Otherwise, you'll get stuck. You'll be lost. So this is the science of work. Yoga Karma Kaushalam. In the 6th chapter, Krishna will explain, yoga means the art of performing work. So it's not that simply you should go and get a job somewhere and work like a donkey day and night. At the end of life, you'll die like a dog, not knowing anything. Just having done eating, mating, sleeping, defending, and secured yourself to do it, and you'll lead a life and you'll lose the valuable human life. It's not that you should simply work like a donkey. You should know why I'm working, what I'm getting from work, what should I get from work, what's the goal of life, am I getting it by my work? This is ultimate question. So here, two types of people. Sankhya Yoga means he wants to understand the self. He wants to understand the truth. He's an intelligent guy. And he says, let me analyze. What is this? What is this? What is this? So everything and anything everywhere. He wants to get all the information and knowledge. It has to pass through his brain, and he'll go slowly about it. He will actually take a very long time. He will take many, many lifetimes. That is a Jnani. Sankhya Yoga, Jnani, all synonymous words. Okay? And the other side is the Bhakta, who takes a Bhakti Yoga or Krishna consciousness. He believes in the words of Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. He, in his heart, has already developed some amount of Krishna consciousness from his previous lives, maybe. And faith comes easily for him. He doesn't have to trouble himself with rational, analytical questions much. I don't need all that proof and all that. I believe in it. But how do you believe in it so fast? You don't use your brain? Well, I have faith. Well, your faith is blind. No, it's not blind. It is evolved over a period of time, many lifetimes. Because the real story is, the Shastra says, Bharata bhumite hoila manusha janmajar janmashar taka kori khara para upakar. If you're born in India, you're already an advanced soul. If you're born in India in a human body, you're even more advanced soul. It means you're already on your spiritual path. To be born in Bharata Bhumi, it is mentioned in Vedic scriptures, is special. It's because you're already advancing little by little, little by little. So that's the first thing you must note. And because you're born in Bharata Bhumi and you're automatically pious and religious, it's because of the past pious and religious activity that you've already done. That's why faith comes easily to you. It's not something new. But it's because of Western thought and Western epistemology that you've been asked to look it through that, you're finding it difficult, and it is affecting your faith. That has been built up over a period of time. So that's why Indians are special. I'm not going around telling India is great, Bharat Mata ki jai and all that, because many of the greatness that India has, we are not following that as to why it is great. India is great because Bhagavad Gita was spoken here only. The greatest philosophy of the absolute truth and reality is spoken here. But we're all struggling to understand that at a late age in life or in something else, because we haven't understood it. We haven't bothered to understand it, or we've been not taught it properly. That's our situation. But however, because we're in India, it's coming easy to us. And we can take advantage of it. So faith has come easy to me. And if somebody challenges to me, have you examined it like this with reason, with proper rationality? You will say, I don't need that. I have my faith. So what's your problem? No, your faith is blind. But he does not know that my faith is evolved. I am in this position of faith because I've evolved in my understanding properly. It's not blind. And I can explain mystic, subjective things to you. Just like simply, can I analyze my faith in my parents? Do I need to at all? If I ask you a rationality, a proper reasoning for the natural affection, faith, and attraction and love I have for my parents, will I be able to explain it? Empirically, through Sankhya Yoga, when I examine, how is it that you have faith in your parents? Arey Baba, my mother, yeah, she bore me for 9 months. That doesn't mean that you have to have, Arey Baba is my father. So what? Have you examined it rationally? Nobody needs to do it. Nobody does it, including that fellow who is asking this question. So we can't rationalize everything. There is affection and love and faith are very subjectively, very fine things. And it's not that everything has to run through the head alone, through the brain alone, for us to be able to have faith in it. So there are many things we have faith in. I have faith that the sun will rise tomorrow. I have faith that this flight that I'm going to take from here to Mumbai will carry me safely. Though I've heard about many flights that have crashed, that something has happened and everything, I have full faith. I have faith in many of these things like that. I have faith in many of these things. And I don't question those faith rationally all the time. Okay? Because it's evolved faith. It's evolved faith. Many of them are now started traveling in the Corona period. I have faith that the vaccination that I've done on me 2 times and the booster that I've taken and the fact that I've tried out now for the past 2 months, moving here and there, I'm confident and I have faith that I'll be protected. I'll wear my mask, I'll keep social distancing, and I don't think anything will happen to me. I'll fly. I'll go around here and there. Isn't it? It's an evolved faith. It's not blind. I vaccinated myself. I cover myself. So my faith, I know best. Same way, we have a certain faith in Krishna, in the words of God, in the Bhagavad Gita, in religion, in the practice that has come to me, right? And the Bhagavad Gita, if I follow very nicely, I will see that I can progress in my Krishna consciousness. I don't need to analyze everything and understand everything under the microscope. There are guys who do that. In Vedic philosophy also, there are guys who do that. They are called Gyanis. They become expert. Chaturvedi, Trivedi, they will Vedavada Rataha Partha Na Anyad Astiti Vadinaha. You heard that in the 2nd chapter, Krishna is telling. They are Vedavadas, they'll speak all the Vedas, everything. But actually speaking, the real stuff they do not know. They'll take a long time to know. But because I have faith, I am actually having the grace and the special mercy that I have faith that I can go ahead in the understanding of the reality. I can accept this. So 2 types of people who directly practice Krishna consciousness because of their faith, and the others who are examining, and according to the amount they have understood, they put their faith. And to that extent they do. A lot of us are analytical, rational, and we want to understand it that way. Nothing wrong in it, but you're going to take a long time. You're going to take, and it's also because of the westernized education system that we have had, which has dumbed down our natural faith and understanding. It's not that people in the Vedic times were not intellectual or not philosophical. They were highly intellectual, highly philosophical, highly well-read. The Upanishad is full of question and answers like this. After all that, they come to the conclusion, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. This person speaking the Bhagavad Gita is a supreme absolute truth. I have read it. I've analyzed it. I've gone through the Upanishad. I'm well read and I've come to this conclusion. And I have put my faith. And it may be you have done it in your previous lifetimes, that in this lifetime you feel, I don't need to do that. I have the faith. So my faith is my own property, my own asset. I don't have to subject it to some external rationality. Okay? So having said that, Prabhupada is telling here, two processes are there. One is direct Krishna consciousness, which will develop your faith even if you did not have it. I follow the instructions of Krishna given here, right? As he's telling in Bhagavad Gita. Bhakti yoga, I follow. I worship the Lord. I chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I read Bhagavad Gita. I stay in the association of devotees. I understand this philosophy as much as I can, and I execute the process of Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga process and the end are both the same. The means and the end are both the same. Right? It's only that your consciousness will change. Like Prabhupada gave somewhere here, how Arjuna is doing it in the purport. Prabhupada will say later. How Arjuna actually did not change. He remained the Kshatriya, he remained the soldier. Krishna was there, the battlefield was there. Everything was same. He just changed his consciousness, surrendered to Krishna's words, fought, and he became victorious and became successful in life. Nothing materially changed. His consciousness changed. And that was the advice given by Krishna, right? So we can change our consciousness where we are by introducing Bhakti Yoga, Krishna consciousness in our life, and directly achieve the absolute truth, Krishna, by Bhakti. So Krishna is explaining about these two types of people. One guy has got faith and he will immediately take up what I'm saying. The other fellow, he doesn't so easily take it up, but he goes through Gyan, goes through the process and everything. And finally, he will take it up. Bahunam janmanam ante jnanavan mam prapadyate vasudevam sarvamiti samahatma sudurlabha. Krishna will explain this character again later. After many, many janmas of Gyan and study, he comes to the conclusion, Vasudevam Sarvamiti. Vasudeva is everything, the root cause. And such a Mahatma, such a great person out of these Gyanis also is very rare. Because most of them will take many millions of births and deaths to finish it. They'll be very nice people, very educated, but not so much invested in Krishna so easily. But there must be a simple, uneducated village boy who grows up as a bhakta. If you go and read in Guruvayur, you'll read Poondanam, the story of Poondanam. He's a village man, but he's got full of love for Krishna in his heart. He's not very well educated like Narayana Bhattatri, who's the other man who's highly educated. But you will see this very nicely there, that he will easily capture the Lord by his soulful prayer, by his little poetry, Jnanapana. He has condensed the whole Bhagavatam in his own dialect language. Manipravalam, that little local language and dialect, he wrote it. And then that was loved by the Lord so much. At the same time, when Narayana Bhattatri wrote Narayaniyam, it's a great Sanskrit scholar. He's also a devotee. But you'll see the difference, that the Lord accepts both of their devotion. And he punishes Narayana Bhattatri for thinking that Poondanam is not very well educated. He doesn't know Sanskrit. He cannot express bhakti. Unless you are educated, you cannot. That's the problem with Gyanis, Sankhya Yoga philosophers and everything. So two classes of people. Krishna is explaining this. He's saying you don't have to worry. And then coming back in the fourth shloka, he's explaining again. Nakarmanam anarambham naiskarmyam purushoshnute. He's saying that some people renounce prematurely, get away from all types of action, and say that I am yogi. I want to practice yogi. So Krishna is saying that those are immature, premature, renounced people, because you cannot get purified. Only when you're purified enough, you could do that. Better you work, do your duty as per your varnashrama, which means you're a kshatriya, you do your duty. And in doing your duty or action, you offer it to the Supreme. By that action, your work will get purified, your consciousness will get purified, and you'll have nothing sinful coming out of it to you. That is a better, more natural way. Why? Because nobody can be without doing any work. You can't go to the Himalaya and sit down peacefully. Your mind will kill you. You'll land up doing something wrong invariably. Because you can't peacefully sit down in one place and think that you'll do. So work as per plan for humans, and then gradually without attachment, and then gradually renounce as you overcome lust. That is explained by Krishna. Because lust in the heart cannot be overcome unless you work on it with detachment and work it, exercise work. And by engaging yourself in those type of activities will keep you away from mischievous sense gratification, which will pull you down. That's called the art of work. If you don't engage in Krishna's service or Krishna conscious activity, you'll be forcefully by default programmed and pushed into sense gratificatory material activity, where you'll commit sin and again get embroiled in reactions and again birth and again death, and you'll go down plummeting. It's dangerous. So better you perform Nishkama Karma Yoga, control yourself, do the work in such a way without too much of fruitive requirement. Even if you do have also, there is the next stage of it that you can do properly Karma Yoga. Nishkama Karma Yoga, Sakama Karma Yoga, and Karma Yoga. We already studied about Sakama Karma Yoga, which Krishna tells Arjuna, you do and enjoy heavenly planets. For a warrior like you, if you die on the battlefield, you'll achieve heavenly planets. If you don't die, if you win the war, you'll achieve your kingdom and you'll enjoy. So it's great. Why don't you do Sakama Karma? If not, better than that is to do Nishkama Karma Yoga. You do it as a duty. Within that comes your duty as a Kshatriya, which you're expected to do anyway. Don't get attached, and you simply perform and you offer it to me, to the Supreme. This was the advice given, which he called as Buddhi Yoga in the second chapter. So you cannot be without doing work, and you must not whimsically do work. You must do work according to prescribed duty within that range, and you offer that also to the Lord. It will become Nishkama Karma Yoga. Na karmanam anarambham naishkarmyam purushošnute nacha sanyasanadeva siddhim samadhi gacchati. Text 4. Not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. He squashes Arjuna's idea of subtly running away from the war and, wow, I don't want this responsibility, this reaction, this thing, my relatives and everything. I want to run away from the scene. He said, if you run away, you will screw yourself up more. Stand and face it. You have to face it. Better you learn how to control your mind and senses. Perform the prescribed activity where your role is to be a Kshatriya. So in our lifetimes, the life hack lesson is that you do come across these situations. Don't run away. Do your duty as you're supposed to. Tolerate. Control your mind. Control your senses. Execute your duty. That will result in your purification. That is the meaning of purification. Stay there, face it, and do your job. You'll be purified. So as you gradually stay there and keep doing it, you'll get more and more purified. The more you get purified, the more easier it will become for you to be Krishna conscious. But prematurely, without purification, if you become a yogi, go to the Himalayas, you'll come back very fast. Don't worry. You can't sustain it. But if you go through the natural path as per your karma, as per your sve karmanya birata, as per your varnashrama, as per your role as a Kshatriya, if you do it, then for sure, you will gradually make progress. This is the first advice he gives. Why? Because nahi kshanamapi jatu tishtatya karma krit karyate hi avashak karma sarvair prakriti jayir gunai. Satyendra Hire Desai, would you read that translation, please?
Yes, Maharaj. All men are forced to act helplessly according to the impulses born of the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment.
You cannot be without doing work. Thank you, Satyendra. You cannot be without doing anything. Why? because there's a pushing on you to force you to do something. It will not leave you alone. We are going to study that further. It's called the modes of material nature, sattva, rajas, tamas, very subtly pushing on you. In the 13th chapter, the 14th chapter, you will read this in great detail. Right? But just understand that you are not free. Don't think you're free to do whatever you want to do. You're not. There are pushings on you. And through the mind, you're getting dictates according to that. And mostly you're doing that. And you will own that and you'll think it's my mind, my idea. But many times it's a pushing. If you analyze very carefully with your intelligence, you will see, who is pushing me? Why are these stories being told to me? Mental stories. You know, if you don't do this will happen, that will happen, then this will happen, that will happen. Therefore, you better do this. Somebody is telling you things inside your head. Have you seen it? Yes or no? And you many times, if you look at it and become conscious of it, it will stop. But when you don't become conscious and not very mindful, it will keep dictating things to you. Wow, go wild like nothing. I call it a film director running amok inside your head and producing fantastic films. Does he do that all the time or not? Yes or no? All the time is going on. That's the force of material nature dictating to you. That is Maya Shakti. Actually, that's not you. The moment you became conscious of it, it will stop. Because you're now self-conscious. When you reduce your spiritual consciousness and become again a zombie, it will start working on you. You examine it for yourself. You'll see it. I'm giving it in simple words so that you can understand it. And Krishna will go in to discuss that detail. It's so fascinating. The psychology of work and what pushes you to work. Amazing information Krishna gives in Bhagavad Gita. So sweetly, so simply he gives it. So now he's telling, you cannot sit quietly. First of all, let me tell you, the program, the way I have made the material world is, nahi kshanamapi, even for a kshana, jatu tishtatya akarmakrit. Akarma means without doing anything, you will never be able to be. Karyate hi avashak karma. You will be forced to do something. Sarvair prakriti jair gunai. The prakriti force through the modes will force you to do something. First, I want to tell you that. He's telling that. So nobody can be without doing work. You can't get even your food without your next shloka. He's telling, you will see, you can't, in the 8th shloka, I'm sorry, he will tell you, Niyatam kuru karmatvam karmajyayo hi akarmanah sharira yatrapi na chate na prasiddhiye takarmanah. What to speak of not being free for even a kshana? You have to perform your prescribed duty. For doing so is better than not working. One cannot even maintain one physical body without work. You have to take a bath, brush your teeth, go to the stool room, and clean yourself up, then eat, do all the. Who's going to do all these things? For all these things require work or not? Of course. So there's no question of you not working. You just forget it. You are programmed to do work. Only thing I am teaching you, Arjuna, is how to do it intelligently. In such a way that you don't get implicated. You don't get implicated. So there is a saying that even the lion in the forest has to do his work to get its food. It says, Nahi suptasya simhasya pravishanti mukhe mriga. Supta means sleeping. Suptasya simhasya means sleeping lion. It is not that because the lion is the king of the forest, he lies down with his mouth open and the deer walks into his mouth and says, here is the food for you. Nahi suptasya simhasya pravishanti mukhe mriga. The mrigai, the beast, is not going to walk into his mouth. Here is your food, your daily food. I'm coming into your mouth. No, although he is the lion, the king of the forest, he has to get up and stalk animals and run and hunt and jump and fight and take his booty and keep it away from the jackals and eat it up. And he has to really do a lot of work, although he's the king of the forest. So everybody invariably has to do. The question is, how smart are you in your work? That is the art of performing work. That's what Krishna starts revealing now, because he's examining the foundations of it. So you cannot be without doing work. And then Krishna goes ahead to say, further, see, text is karime indriyani samyamma ya aste manasa smaran indriyarthan vimudhatma mityachara sa uchyate. This is a beautiful shloka. Krishna, I read this to you. Let's see. You want to read this? Please read the translation of the thing on the screen. I chanted this just before. So, Girish, can you read what's on the screen?
Perform your prescribed duty, or action is better than inaction. A man cannot even maintain his physical body without work.
You can't see it?
Sorry?
Can you see that?
Yeah, 3.8.
Yes. So you see there, you cannot even maintain a physical body. Then go ahead further. Go to, I've not got it on the screen, but you go to text 6.
6.
Can you read the purport? Can you read the translation of text 6, Priya? Can you read text 6 if you've got it with you? Translation.
One who restrains the senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender.
Thank you. Mithya sa uchyate. Mithya means falsity. So you may renounce, you may go through the Himalayas and sit down and become an artificial sannyasi and not do any work. And what will happen is your mind will sit and think of sense gratification. Ah, so wonderful. That was so, this was so good, this was so good. In the Himalayas, you'll be thinking about it. Your head inside will be filled with all these things. And if you do prematurely renunciation or getting away from work, that's what will happen to you. Krishna is warning Arjuna. And Prabhupada is commenting on that. There are pretenders and pseudo so-called yogis who do official meditation for the sake of work, for the sake of getting money, and for fooling people and cheating guys. But actually, they are engaging in sense gratification of the highest order. They may be in portraying themselves externally like this, but they are not actually yogis. They are not actually really interested in the absolute truth. They just use that line for either they want to become famous and promote themselves as popular, and you will see them become so popular that sometimes they'll stand inside between you and God and make themselves more prominent than God. They'll ask you to follow him or her and worship them or her. And they'll not ask you and show you the way to worship God. They'll do all sorts of things. It's very amazingly clear from these statements that there are people like this. That's why Krishna is talking about it. There are people who are pretenders that they are really searching for the absolute truth, or they call themselves seekers or whatever it is. But their thing is to promote themselves, have a sense gratification of a very subtle type, intellectual type, mental type, and many of them even physical types. On one of these levels, they'll be gratifying themselves. But they are not going to do only gratification of the Supreme, for service of the Supreme, which is what Krishna is recommending here to Arjuna, because that only will purify you. So we never know who is who. So this is a hint Krishna is giving. If you fool, you not only will you fool yourself, you'll fool everybody else also and lead them in the wrong way. So this is very important. See the Prabhupada's purport there. There are many pretenders who refuse to work in Krishna consciousness but make a show of meditation while actually dwelling within the mind upon sense enjoyment. Such pretenders may also speak on dry philosophy in order to bluff sophisticated followers. But according to this verse, these are the greatest cheaters. So Prabhupada's guru said, it is a world of the cheaters and the cheated. And he said, why? There are some people who want cheaters as their guru. Why? Because they also are wanting to cheat themselves of the real spiritual life that Krishna has mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. They are looking for somebody who will be a compromised version of the Bhagavad Gita and sort of echo what I want to do for sense gratification. So there are cheaters who will exactly speak what you want to hear. This is what I'm looking for. Thank you for giving me this massage. The thoughts in my mind is very clearly massaged by what you are saying. I like you, I follow you. So the cheaters and the cheated get together. And the process, they compromise on the real stuff. The real expression that Krishna has given, both get together and set it aside. And I follow you, you follow me. You scratch my back, I scratch your back. And this way, I be very comfortable. So he called it the world of the cheaters and the cheated. But Arjuna didn't go for it. He's being told by Krishna, don't fall for that. Don't do this premature renunciation. Sit and face it, work it out, and you'll get purified. Don't be a mithyachara. Don't be a pretender. Right? So in the text 7, you'll see, yes, tva indriyani manasa niyam arabhate Arjuna karma indriya karma yogam asaktas vishishyate. Instead of being a pretender, the better thing for you to do, Arjuna, is to engage your senses in the service of the Supreme, which is called karma yoga. You should do that. Okay. So Devika, can you read that translation for Sloka 7?
Yes, Maharaj. Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if a sincere person tries to control the active senses by the mind and begins karma yoga in Krishna consciousness without attachment, he is by far superior.
Yeah. If you sit and work at it, try to control your senses and mind, pray to Krishna, engage in the sadhana bhakti, do the bhakti yoga, and that is the reality. You don't have to become a famous guy. If you want to become God consciousness, you don't have to worry about other guys, vox populi, voting for you. You are a great devotee. It's Krishna who should know that you are a great devotee, not outside people. This is an internal business. Why should you get votes from others? Why should you wear a costume and become very great on social media? Not required. Because the person who is to tick you off is Krishna. So you bother internally about doing the right job. So Krishna is telling it is far better because I know you very well. And if you are struggling and tumbling and fumbling, I will hold you to my heart and give you all the mercy because you're trying. That is more realistic rather than showing off somewhere as a great so-and-so and inside you're a boka. I know you inside what you are. Right? It's very plainly he's saying it here. Right? Better is to do this. He's saying, Yasva indriyani manasa niyamarabhate Arjuna karmendriye karma yogam ashaktasya vishishyate. See, everything that people are doing in this world is already known because the conditioned soul Atma will do certain gymnastics only. And that same thing happens yuga after yuga, life after life. And that the father knows very well what possibly you could do. Just like the mother knows very well possibly what the kid will do. In the pram or on the way to school or here, what he will possibly do, I know very well. And she will take care of it. So Krishna also knows he's taking care of it. You rascal soul, I know what you will do because I've seen you doing it many times. And under this conditioning, I know how you'll behave. Actually, it will be known, no? So he's coolly saying it. And 8th shloka, niyatam kuru karmatvam. You cannot be without doing at least a basic activity of your work. Therefore, he concludes on the 9th, Yajñartat karmano anyatra loko yam karma bandhana tadartham karma kaunteya mukta sanga samachara. So on the screen you will see. Please read that, Sita Lakshmi.
Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work binds one to this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, and in that way you will always remain unattached and free from bondage.
Yes, thank you. So you see that? That is the conclusion for today. Step by step, Krishna is analyzed. Number 1, you can never be without doing any work. Number 2, be smart worker. Right? Number 3, better than foolishly stopping work and hiding behind the instruction of renunciation and giving up your responsibility. Better you struggle in your work, struggle to do it. Because when you struggle to do it properly, you will purify yourself. And I'll be with you. It is expected that you will struggle to do it. Don't worry about all the guys around you telling all sorts of things. And as long as you are struggling to do it properly within the Varnashrama and everything, and think of me and offer it to me, even if you do it imperfectly, it is good. Just like a child, when it's trying to walk with baby steps, the mother is very thrilled, is taking that effort to walk. It's amazing for her to see, and the whole family takes part in it. And then she will do it. Everybody enjoys it. It's not that she says, "Cha, stupid, you don't know how to walk properly. I thought you're my kid. Don't you walk?" No. The 2 steps you took is amazing. Although you're watching me walk, and in the morning my father goes to run, everything I can do, but when I see you walk those 2-3 steps, I am in bliss. Same way, when Krishna sees you taking that imperfect steps towards him, you get purified. It doesn't matter you do it wrongly. That is the thing about Krishna consciousness. If you express your bhakti to Krishna even imperfectly or try hard, it's very valuable to Krishna. And by his blessings, you'll become increasingly better very fast. Do you understand? So Krishna is saying, I want to advise you, better you do it for me. That's the best quality work. Yajñartat karmano anyatra. Why? It will protect you from influence of the modes. It will protect you from sinful reaction. It will protect you from getting allured into sense gratification. And you'll make progress and become blossomed in full consciousness very soon. So better you do it for me. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed by every conditioned soul. Otherwise, there's no escape, because that will purify you directly. That is why we are doing work for Krishna. In the Gita Jayanti, many wonderful souls sponsored Bhagavad Gita. I want to do this work for Krishna. I want to tell him that with my body, with my mind, with my words, with my wealth, I want to serve him. So there are wonderful devotees from all of you sponsored 1 Gita, 2 Gita, 3, 10, 15, 20, 51. Somebody sponsored 108 Gitas. And we called upon students and we gave it to them and said, you have to attend a free Bhagavad Gita course. This way, we are able to forcefully tell the education institution, we want to give Bhagavad Gitas to 51 of your students and they should take this course. Yes, Swamiji. Yes, Swamiji. And then we got them. We are going around doing the courses, and all your Bhagavad Gitas donated is going to be opened up by each of these guys, and he may become Krishna conscious because of you. And Krishna notices that this soul did this seva and this soul got to read it and he became my devotee. So you'll get benefit for that. So Yajñartat Karmana you have done. You have actually used your so-called asset in doing a little service. Doesn't matter. Even a little bit you're able to do. The more you gradually want to do, the more you realize, the more you will like to do. But that's what Krishna is saying. Do for me. In other words, he's trying to get you away from always doing only for yourself selfishly. I, me, mine. Right? I, me, mine. I wrote a small poem. I think some of you got it. I, me, mine. Here he'll sit and pine. Yesterday in a womb. Tomorrow in a tomb. Still mine, mine, this swine. When I came into Krishna conscious person, I was reading the Bhagavad Gita. It's about maybe 25, 30 years. I was inspired to write this. Casually, as I was reading Gita one fine day, what a rascal I am. I'm going around saying it's mine, mine, mine. Actually, it belongs to Krishna. I got inspired to write it. And even today, when I look at that poem, I said, wow, it's lots of meaning in it. So we should try to be givers with whatever we have. Give for the sake of Krishna. That'll purify you. That's what's the meaning of saying yajñartat karmano anyatra lokoyam karma bandhana. It will save you from getting entangled. Tadartham karma kaunteya mukta sangha samachara. It will become the reason for you to get mukti, relieved from matter. Okay? So now you're actually getting to know what is work. Although you go for a job very casually, there's a lot of philosophy behind it and the mechanics behind it. You can understand what a fantastic book Bhagavad Gita is. It's not simply do your duty alone. Do your duty with proper smart understanding. Okay? Right. Open for any question you have.